What's up, you sim racers out there? It's Larry TJR Sim here. Today we're going to check out RaceRoom Racing Experience VR settings. This is for the Samsung Odyssey, which has a higher resolution screen and can be a little bit difficult on your system. I'm currently running a 4930K CPU i7 with a 1080 Ti MSI graphics card. Now, my graphics card is not really the problem. I am getting some throttling with my CPU. So if you have an older, say X79 motherboard platform like I do, and haven't upgraded yet, these settings may be of value to you when you're running a higher end headset. Did overclock my RAM to 1833, but somehow my motherboard wouldn't let me overclock my CPU, so it's still running at 3.4 gigahertz. So anyway, just dive on in and show you some settings here I have. Now you want to go to RaceRoom. Now you don't really need to go to the VR settings for the SteamVR to change your RaceRoom's super sampling rate. You can just do it within the loading option. So you want to go to properties like you just saw me do, set launch properties, and I'm running a negative VR space 1.3, so that's a 1.3 super sampling, and that's pretty much the sweet spot. Now when you test on tracks like Bathurst, was my testing ground, I had to go down to 1.2 as well, just to have it locked in at a 80 to 90 FPS range. You know, it'll fluctuate in that range, but never getting out of that range. 1.2 super sampling worked best. 1.3 looked a little better. 1.5 looks really good, but you will be in asynchronous mode a lot. So it's pretty finicky with that, even though this is an older graphical game rather. So of course with that it's not optimized as well, and I'm running an old system. So VR 1.3 is the set negative VR, that is negative VR space 1.3. That's what you want to put in, and that's for most tracks. It's going to get you that good 80 to 90 FPS range. I'm going to go ahead and delete it out of there and say okay, make sure it's cleared. Yep, because I'm just going to launch the game by itself, so I can show you the settings a little bit easier. And as well, when you go to play in VR, trying to show you live gameplay, I would have to use the Windows Mixed Reality window, and you could see my live gameplay, but it really hurts the FPS with that going. As a note, if you're running anything like let's say your NVIDIA experience and stuff, that actually hurts your frame rate as well. So you'll want to turn that off when you're trying to optimize your FPS with VR. So let's okay, we're loaded up in there. Let's go at it. And if you look at, well, if I move too quick, go over here and click on the cogs, go to video settings, custom settings, and here are the settings I'm running right now. Track level detail, this is pretty, the more track detail you have, the better it looks, but it hits your FPS pretty hard. Car LOD resistance settings, I have that on low. That doesn't matter in VR because it's too far away to see anyway. Particle detail, that's not particularly too hard on your settings, so I'll run it at medium, and you see a little bit more intense tire smoke when people were spinning out and stuff. And I haven't experienced any asynchronous mode or dropping down to 45 FPS with that. Tire marks on, looks good. See where they've been skidding. Doesn't seem to hurt anything. Specular doesn't hurt anything. I leave it on. Car reflections, that does hurt a little bit, so I keep it on low. Medium, you can run medium on most tracks and get away with it just fine. Every so often you'll dip into the asynchronous mode when you have a few cars around you at one time, is what I noticed. With low, I don't ever dip into it. So yeah, for what it's worth. It's not a huge quality difference between the two, so I just leave it on low. Track animations off, they'll hit you hard. Shadows, this is a huge one. Shadows, I have to run them off. Now if you're running a later CPU, like a i7 8700K or something like that, you know, somewhere on the newer platforms like the Z370 platforms or the X299 platforms, running the high-end stuff, you know, you're going to go ahead and whack that shadows on up to high. I don't know, I haven't tested with that. Obviously I don't have that high of a system, but comment below if you do and let us know what shadows that you are running on to help out others that may be running a higher end system like you. Yeah, at some point you're going to start hitting your GPU as well, so I would say if you have a higher end system, medium would probably be as high as you want to go. If you're like me with a lower end system, lowest is the highest I can go, and I'll dip into the asynchronous mode quite often, probably around 50% of the time, I would say. So it does disturb your flow, your feel of speed a little bit. So I just leave it off. Lowest does look better, obviously, but anyway, and with the shadows on lowest, the cars look more connected to the road because they're casting shadows further out from the cars. So something to play with there. You could try lowest and then bump your multi-sampling to no AA and go that way. I tried it down to 4 AA is really kind of the sweet spot, I think. But anyway, leave it off if you're having problems. It doesn't hurt your game. I mean, it totally improves your gameplay, but it's not a deal breaker. It just looks prettier with it on. So anyway, it is what it is. Car shadows on, so they will have some shadows underneath them, but it's not as brilliant as you would have if you put the shadows up on lowest or low or even higher as well. Contact shadows, that actually seem to make a difference. It goes up to 32. I ended up just, I tried like at 10 and stuff like that, different settings. I just leave it on 1. It doesn't seem to make a huge visual difference to me, being that you have shadows off. So leaving it at 1 fixes it. Shadow split, don't like that on. It just, I don't see any difference in the VR, and it just hits my frame rate. Now multi-sampling, that's actually a pretty big one. If you go to no AA, everything looks really jaggedy out there. Keep in mind your super sampling that you preset at 1.3, that's going to give you that blurriness or clean up your screen all around. Your overall appearance of your screen is going to look less blurry with a higher super sampling. And then your multi-sampling, your AA, that's going to clean up your jaggy edges and stuff more so. That's on top of the super sampling. So the more you add on this AA, anti-aliasing, the more it's going to hit your CPU and your GPU. Okay, so you may have to run no AA if you have a really old system, but 2AA is really the, well, honestly 4AA is really the happy medium. 2AA would be the medium minimum that I would try to run if you can get away with it, and just start bumping down your super sampling to quit dipping into the asynchronous mode. That would be my suggestion. So I actually ended up working out with my settings to go all the way up to 8AA unless I am running Bathurst. Bathurst is a very intensive track, a lot of objects around, even with these settings that you see here. With that one, I will dip into the asynchronous mode from time to time. I'm probably around 75-80% out of asynchronous mode when I'm driving, but if you want to totally be out of it, and there's not a real huge graphical difference between 4 and 8 by my eyes, but you'll want to go ahead and put it at 4 on tracks like that are very intensive tracks like Bathurst. But anyway, 4 is kind of the sweet spot right there. You can run 8 times as well, but play with those two. If you want to have the steady 80 to 90 FPS, again, I would keep it at 4. So going back here, let's see, we got medium, on, low, off, on, 1, off, 4AA. FXAA, that's really crappy in VR. You don't want to have that on at all. It kind of blurs the edges. It's a superficial AA. It's looks horrible. Bloom, you can leave that on, not a problem. For some reason, my bloom literally turns itself off all the time. Don't know why, but that's what it does. Depth of field off, because it doesn't matter. You can't see that far down the field. Motion blur off. You wouldn't want that in VR. Of course, with that off, the quality doesn't matter. Light shafts, you can leave them on. I can't tell a difference, and it's probably because when I come back to this menu system, my light shafts are automatically turned off and my bloom's turned off. So it's not really working for me anyway. Lens effects, if you want some lens effects, turn it on. It doesn't really seem a big hitter for me. I leave it off. And it's not a lot of visual cue to it anyway, so from what I saw. And all my tests have been done at Bathurst, so the more intensive track. So these settings are more for the most intensive track. As you go to less intensive tracks with less objects around on the track, you can actually bump up your AA or your super sampling. But I would leave all these settings about the same. Track texture quality on high, car texture quality on high. Looks good on the car. The only way it looks better in the car is when you're able to bump up your shadows. When you're able to bump up your shadows, everything looks more alive to you. Let me see. Okay, rear view mirror on low. You can actually bump that up to medium or high rather. I don't really notice the difference between medium and high too much. When I bump it up from from low to high, the cars definitely look better in the rear view mirror, but it does hit your frame rate, so adjust to your liking. Generally the race is in front of you, not behind you, so I leave it on low. I can still tell there's a Ferrari behind me or an Audi just fine, so I leave it on low. Shader quality on low, that actually makes a difference. As soon as I bump it up to medium, it knocks me into asynchronous mode with these above settings, so I'll go ahead and leave it in low. Corner markers off, you don't need them. Visible cars, it goes up to I think 32 or no 52, sorry, but I'll go ahead and leave it on the minimum at 10 cars visible on the track. Generally in any other VR environment, however many cars it's trying to replicate around you tend to make a difference. Leaving these on 10 as well as all my above settings, I'm able to dog it out with other cars around me and not drop out of that 80 to 90 FPS range just real fine, which actually makes it a lot more fun that way when you don't go in asynchronous mode. And you notice it really hard in RaceRoom because if you're, I was using the McLaren 650 GT3. You notice the edges of your dash and your hood start getting real blurry. You look out your side window, it gets real blurry and stuff. It's how you can kind of immediately tell you went into asynchronous mode. Opponent cockpit's off, you don't need it. So that is my settings. I will go over it quickly here so you can do some screenshots here. This first screen, on, low, medium, on, low, off, and on, and contact shadows at 1. So let's see, the second screen would be at shadow split. Take a screenshot of this at off. Multi-sampling at 4AA. Again, bump it up to 8AA if you can spare it. Most tracks will allow you to run AA 8 times anti-aliasing, but the most intensive tracks like Bathurst, you'll hit it. You'll get a FPS hit. FXAA always off, bloom on, off, low, on, off, high and high for the car textures. Alright, so your third screenshot will of course pick up from, you'll want from here on, low, off, 10 and off. So those are all the settings. I hope it helps y'all guys and gals that are running lower end, say CPUs, but a high end GPU. I got the highest end GPU, but a really low, well, I guess the Titan Z would be higher end, but for the money, the highest end. And I got a really low CPU, so I'm gonna have to do me a computer rebuild here soon. So which for me is going to be a little bit more, will have to be a complete rebuild because I have an X79 motherboard. So there is no more higher CPU for that motherboard from my understanding. So anyway, hope it helps you out. No gameplay with this one, just raw settings, and it's actually, RaceRoom is really good in VR. It's a lot of fun when you run it with VR, especially with motion and transducers mixed. Leave comments below what you're running with your system specs to maybe help out others, and see you on the track. I'm out.